My name is Diana, and for most of my life, I was described with qualifiers. Not successful, getting there. Not settled, figuring things out. Not impressive, full of potential. Those words followed me quietly, the way background noise does. You don't notice it at first, but after years, you realize it has shaped how you breathe. From the outside, my family looked like the kind people admired. A neat house, coordinated holiday photos, a mother who spoke passionately about family unity. If you passed us in a restaurant or scrolled past us online, you'd think we were close, supportive, proud of one another. Inside, things were more organized than loving. There was an order. At the top was my sister Jessica. Jessica was 2 years older and seemed born knowing how to win approval. She didn't try harder. She didn't need to. Teachers praised her. Friends gathered around her naturally. My mother talked about her accomplishments as if they were extensions of her own success. Jessica didn't just do well. She made the family look good. I was the other one. The quiet one. The observant one. The one who learned early that taking up less space meant fewer disappointments. My achievements weren't ignored completely. They were acknowledged briefly, efficiently, like items being checked off a list before moving on to something more interesting. After my parents divorced, my mother remarried. Dave entered our lives without disruption. He had a talent for neutrality, which sounded virtuous but mostly meant he never interfered. He didn't create the imbalance between my sister and me, but he never challenged it either. Silence, I learned, can be a powerful form of agreement. At dinner, Jessica's stories unfolded in full detail. Questions followed her answers. Laughter lingered. When I spoke, heads nodded politely. Conversations moved on. I adapted. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped announcing goals. I learned that saying less protected me from disappointment. If no one knew what I was working toward, no one could tell me I wasn't there yet. I worked through school on my own, took jobs that paid the bills but drained the spirit. I told myself it was temporary, that patience would matter someday. I didn't ask for help, not because I didn't need it, but because I already knew what it would cost. By the time I met David, I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. He was different from anyone I'd known. Calm, but not distant. Attentive without being intrusive. When I talked, he listened without correcting, without comparing, without asking when I'd finally arrive. To him, I already had. We built our life slowly and deliberately. Not flashy, not performative, just solid. Mornings that felt unhurried. Evenings without commentary. A relationship where silence felt safe instead of heavy. When we bought our house, it wasn't impressive by my family's standards. It wasn't large. It didn't announce anything. But it felt like us. Afternoon light spilled through the windows. The kitchen smelled like coffee and bread. Every corner held intention instead of expectation. We hosted a housewarming party with friends. Real friends. People who showed up without needing updates on our progress. People who knew me without context or comparison. I didn't invite my family, not out of spite, not to send a message. I just wanted one thing in my life that didn't feel like an audition. Of course, they noticed eventually. At first, the questions came gently, casual curiosity wrapped in pleasant tones. "So where did you end up buying?" my mom asked one afternoon, smiling the way she did when she thought she already knew the answer. I kept my reply simple. In the city, quiet area. "Oh," she said quickly, "that area." As if she were filling in a blank I hadn't asked her to. The more neutral I stayed, the more unsettled she seemed. Jessica took a different approach. Late-night texts asking for photos, questions about renovations, layouts, future plans. Each message felt measured, like she was placing my life against hers, checking alignment. A few weeks later, clarity arrived unexpectedly. I ran into Mike, Jessica's husband, at a grocery store near my neighborhood. He looked exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. The kind of fatigue that settles into posture. When he mentioned their house, his voice dropped slightly. "It's a lot," he said carefully. "The payments, the upkeep, everything adds up." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. After that, my mother's calls shifted. She stopped asking about my house. Instead, she talked about stress, about pressure, about how difficult things were for Jessica, about how family needed to support each other during challenging times. Then she said it. "You're doing well now," she told me. "Better than we expected, honestly. Maybe you could help out a little, just until things stabilize." Help out didn't mean advice. It didn't mean emotional support. It meant money. I sat at my desk after that call, staring at numbers I'd earned slowly, carefully, without safety nets. I thought about the years I struggled quietly, the nights I worked late, the times no one stepped in when I needed help most. It was strange how success suddenly made me useful. When I said no, something shifted. My mother didn't argue. She sounded wounded, disappointed, as if I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. Dave sent a message about responsibility, about family obligations. Jessica went silent, then a single text appeared. I didn't think you'd be like this. After that, the invitations stopped. No casual dinners, no birthdays, no updates that weren't laced with guilt. I was outside the circle again, not because I hadn't done enough, but because I wouldn't fix something I hadn't broken. One evening, sitting beside David on our couch, I said the thing I'd been avoiding. I think they only want me around when I'm useful. He didn't rush to reassure me. He didn't minimize it. He just nodded. Then the question, he said gently, is how much access you're willing to give people who don't actually see you. I didn't answer right away, but something inside me had already begun to settle. Not into anger, but into clarity. And clarity, I would soon learn, makes people very uncomfortable. The silence from my family didn't arrive all at once. It thinned first. Group chats went quiet. Messages stopped mid-conversation. I'd scroll through my phone and realize days had passed without a single notification from anyone related to me by blood. Later, photos would surface online. Dinners, birthdays, familiar faces gathered around tables I once sat at. Proof that life was continuing, just without me in the frame. Strangely, the absence didn't hurt the way it used to. It felt different this time. Not like rejection, but like confirmation. When my mom finally called, her voice carried the tone she used when she believed she was being reasonable. You took things too personally, she said, as if explaining a minor misunderstanding. Jessica is under a lot of pressure right now. You could have been more supportive. Supportive. The word hung between us, heavy and undefined. I asked her what support had looked like when I was working 2 jobs and studying late into the night. When I bought my first car without help. When I built my career quietly, without applause or backup. She didn't answer. Instead, she shifted topics, as if my question hadn't landed at all. A few minutes later, Dave sent a long message. He wrote about family sticking together, about how money comes and goes, but relationships last. He didn't mention how quickly those relationships seemed to disappear when money wasn't available. Jessica called a few days later. Her voice was sharp at first, defensive. She talked about expectations, about embarrassment, about how overwhelmed she felt carrying the image everyone expected her to maintain. Then her tone softened. I just thought you'd understand, she said. You always do. That sentence did something final inside me. I realized they weren't asking because they respected me. They were asking because I had always absorbed discomfort quietly, because I was reliable in my silence, because I was expected to bend so others wouldn't have to. I hung up and sat alone in my home office, staring out the window. The city moved as it always had. Cars passed, lights flickered on. Life didn't pause for revelations. But I had. That night, I told David everything I'd never fully admitted out loud. How small I felt around them, how every interaction left me replaying conversations, editing myself after the fact, wondering how I could have said things better. He listened, then asked a question so simple it felt almost unfair. What do you want your life to feel like? The answer came immediately. Peace. Not approval, not recognition, not admiration. Peace. So I stopped explaining myself. When messages arrived wrapped in guilt, I responded politely and briefly. When invitations didn't come, I didn't ask why. I filled my time with people who showed up without conditions, friends who didn't need updates on my progress to value my presence. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't strategy, it was a boundary. And boundaries don't announce themselves. They quietly change what you're willing to tolerate. A few weeks later, my mom called again. Jessica's birthday dinner? A nice restaurant, just family. I said yes before I could overthink it. Not because I expected reconciliation, but because I needed to see what would happen when I no longer played my assigned role. The restaurant was exactly the kind my mom liked to choose when she wanted things to feel important. Low lighting, crisp white tablecloths, glassware polished enough to reflect your face back at you whether you wanted to see it or not. Jessica was already there when David and I arrived. She looked flawless in a way that required effort. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, the kind of polish that felt tight, like it might fracture if she relaxed for even a moment. Mom hugged her first. Dave followed. I waited, smiling politely, feeling more like a guest than a daughter. Dinner began the way these evenings always did. Safe topics, controlled laughter. Jessica talked about work. Mom filled in details. Dave nodded at the right moments. No one asked how I was doing. I didn't volunteer it. I watched my mother carefully cut into her food, savoring the atmosphere she'd curated. Then she smiled. The same smile I'd seen countless times before. "Your sister's housewarming party was so lovely," she said warmly. "Everyone's still talking about it." Jessica glanced up, pleased. Dave murmured approval. Then my mom turned to me. "So," she said lightly, tilting her head, "when are you going to catch up?" The words were delivered without malice. That almost made them worse. They carried an assumption so deeply embedded she didn't even recognize it as judgment. For a moment, everything slowed. The murmur of other conversations, the soft clink of silverware, the weight of the fork in my hand. I thought about all the times I'd laughed off comments like this, all the nights I'd gone home replaying them, wondering what was wrong with me. I set my fork down. I didn't rush, I didn't smile. "I hosted mine last year," I said calmly. The table stilled. My mom blinked. "Yours?" "Our housewarming," I clarified. "David and I had it last year." Jessica frowned. "You did?" "Yes. It was a really nice night." Confusion crossed my mother's face, then something sharper. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" I took a slow breath. "You just weren't invited." Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Around the table, reactions rippled. Jessica stopped mid-sip. Dave finally looked up from his plate. "What do you mean we weren't invited?" my mom asked, her voice tight. "I mean exactly that," I said evenly. "We invited people who show up for us." Jessica shifted in her chair. "Diana, maybe we should—" "No," I said gently without looking at her. "I need to finish." I turned back to my mom. "For years, my life only mattered when it resembled Jessica's," I continued. "When I struggled, it was expected. When I succeeded quietly, it didn't count. And when I built something that finally made me happy, you didn't ask how it felt. You asked why you weren't included." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "I love you," she said. "You're my daughter." "I know you believe that," I replied. "But love isn't pride when things look good. It's showing up when they don't." Dave cleared his throat. "This feels unfair. Family makes allowances for each other." "I've made allowances my entire life," I said. What I stopped doing was shrinking myself to keep everyone comfortable. Jessica looked down at her plate. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "I didn't realize you felt this way." "I believe you," I said honestly. "That doesn't change the impact." The table fell silent. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. A reminder that the world keeps moving, even when your own story shifts. I reached for my wallet and placed cash on the table. "I'm not angry," I said, standing. "I'm just done apologizing for who I am." I turned to Jessica. "Happy birthday, I hope you find what you're looking for." Then I walked away, and for the first time, I didn't look back. The fallout didn't arrive in a dramatic wave. It came quietly, in fragments. Days passed without messages, no calls, no follow-ups. The silence felt unfamiliar, not sharp like punishment, not heavy with expectation, just empty. And for the first time, that emptiness didn't scare me. I realized something unsettling and freeing at the same time. I wasn't waiting anymore. Jessica was the first to reach out, not with accusations, not with explanations, just a short message. "I need some space." I gave it to her without question. Distance, I'd learned, can be a form of respect, for others and for yourself. Weeks turned into months, and things began to shift in subtle ways. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jessica and Mike had sold their house, the big one, the one that had looked perfect in photos but heavy in real life. They moved into something smaller, quieter, more manageable. Her social media changed too. Fewer polished moments, fewer declarations of success, more ordinary things. Books on a coffee table, long walks, a dog she adopted that looked endlessly grateful just to belong somewhere. I didn't comment, I didn't analyze, I just noticed. My mom reached out once, carefully. A short message that didn't apologize but left a door cracked open. I didn't rush to walk through it. I let it exist without obligation. David and I returned to our routines. Morning coffee in the kitchen, evenings that ended without tension, friends who stayed longer than planned and laughed easily. Our home felt lighter, like it had been waiting for me to stop dragging old expectations through the door. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. What I felt was steady. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about that restaurant, about the way the room went still, about my fork resting on the table, untouched, about the silence that followed my words. That silence didn't break my family. It clarified everything. For most of my life, I thought love meant trying harder, being more patient, staying smaller, proving I deserved a seat at the table. I was wrong. Love doesn't ask you to disappear so others can feel comfortable. It doesn't require you to bleed quietly while calling it support. And it doesn't only show up when you're useful. Success doesn't need witnesses to be real. Peace doesn't need permission. Months later, Jessica called. Not to argue, not to defend herself, just to talk. Her voice sounded different, less sharp, less controlled. I didn't realize how much pressure I was under, she said, or how much I assumed you'd always be there to absorb things. I listened, not as the fixer, not as the quieter sister, just as myself. I'm not angry, I told her, but I can't go back to how things were. I know, she said softly. I wouldn't ask you to. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't closure. It was honesty, and that was enough. My relationship with my mother remained distant but civil. There were no dramatic apologies, no emotional breakthroughs, just fewer expectations, fewer assumptions. I no longer tried to translate myself into something she could brag about. I stopped chasing approval that only arrived with conditions. The strangest part was realizing how much energy that chase had taken. Without it, life felt quieter and fuller. I found myself enjoying small things without narrating them to anyone. A new plant thriving on the windowsill, a book finished slowly instead of rushed, laughter that didn't feel performative. I wasn't behind. I never had been. I'd just been running a race that wasn't mine. Looking back, I understand now why my words at that dinner shocked them. It wasn't because I was cruel or loud. It was because I was calm, because I didn't argue, because I didn't ask to be understood. I stated my truth and stood by it. People are often less disturbed by anger than they are by certainty. Certainty leaves no room for control. If you've ever been compared, overlooked, or quietly categorized as the one who needs more time, let me tell you something I learned too late but live by now. You are not late. You are not lacking. You are not behind. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't translate well to people who only value appearances. You are allowed to step back from dynamics that shrink you. You are allowed to choose peace even when it confuses others. Especially then. The night I walked out of that restaurant, I didn't win anything. I didn't fix my family. I didn't change who they were. What I changed was who I was willing to be. And that changed everything. So if this story feels familiar, if you've spent years trying to earn comfort instead of claiming it, know this. You don't need to catch up. You just need to stop running someone else's race.